Hey guys, really quick, I wanted to take a second and talk about podcasting. Why? Because this medium has been the greatest thing to ever happen to me. A little over 5.5 years ago, I bought a $60 microphone and everything in my life has changed. I've gone on to build a successful business, live events, a lucrative speaking career, and I've been able to connect and become friends with some of the most influential thought leaders in the world, all because of podcasting. Now, you might not know this about me, but I've also helped multiple other people do the same thing. I usually work one-on-one with high-ticket clients to help them really build their brand. But so many people were asking me, Justin, I need to know the secret. So I've actually put together a masterclass. So if you head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, you can sign up for the masterclass today and learn exactly how I've been able to build this business, and you can too. This course is for wannabe podcasters and also podcasters who aren't getting the results that they want. Again, head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, grab your masterclass now, dive in, and take your life to the next level. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. Alex, welcome to the show, man.
Justin, so glad to be here, man. Appreciate you having me on.
No, yeah, we've kind of been in each other's space for quite some time, just because of PodFest and knowing Chris Kremitzos and me always seeing you on the calls and you seeing me on the calls, and I was like, I got to reach out to this guy. I was thinking that in the back of my head, and then somebody I'm in a mastermind with said, "Hey, you should talk to Justin." And so here we are. We had connected a couple months ago, and I'm really excited to dive into podcasting with you. And I told you, as I invited you on, about once a year, because I love this medium and I love how people can use it to really spread their important messages. I bring an expert on in the space about once a year, and you're my expert this time, man. So really excited to have you here. But why don't you take a minute and tell my audience who's Alex, and then we'll dive into the backstory. We'll dive into all the good stuff.
Yeah, sure, man. First off, I'm honored to be like the podcasting talent. I'm doing air quotes here for anyone who can't see that, but I'm honored to fill that space, and it's something I do on my show as well. You and I talked about next year bringing you on as well, like you're another podcasting expert. But it's a topic that is really popular and continuing to grow in popularity because of podcasting. But anyway, I digress. A little bit about me real quick. So I've been in podcasting full time for about 1.5 years now. That's when I started my show right as I was getting out of corporate. I did 15 years in the aerospace industry as a corporate senior executive, or I should say worked my way up to that level, and thoroughly enjoyed that career, loved it, but I always had that entrepreneurial mind. And when I started looking around at what I could do to really start flexing that muscle, if you will, I just saw podcasting and had been someone who really loved it and learned and was growing from different shows, yours included in that. And it was something like, man, I want to do this for myself. Like, this seems like a really cool thing. So I jumped into it, decided to start a show, and ended up doing really well. And just fell in love with the guests I had along the way. But more importantly than that, I really started enjoying the community of people that make up podcasters, both on the guest side and the host side. And that's kind of my background. That's what brings me to present day where we're at now.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people who they listen to podcasts. Obviously, way more people listen to podcasts than there are podcasters. Right. I talk to so many people who listen regularly, and they're just like, I want to start a podcast. I want to start a podcast. But most people do it wrong, right? And I believe we just talked about the genius zone, right? One of my zones of genius is properly doing a podcast and not just throwing it up against the wall. Talk a little bit about that. When you decided to dive into the podcasting space, what did that look like for you? Did you go and get the knowledge, or did you just jump headfirst in? Like, what was the whole background there?
So it's a good question, man. And as a matter of fact, I'll share some backstory that I just skipped in that little introduction that I gave you. This is something I don't share too much, but I think it was probably 7 years ago now, I started a podcast. Wow. And there wasn't a lot, like 7 years ago. Here's the thing, like in podcasting years, 7 years ago is like more than 70 years. I mean, that's a full lifetime at this point. So there was really no education out there. It was kind of like you need an RSS feed and you need to somehow get it on Apple. And I remember like trying to figure this out. It was like a mess, man. I'm like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing here. And I ended up recording just on my cell phone. And me having no background in this stuff, I just assumed that, oh, cars don't seem to have echo. I'll just record it in a car, which is like the worst place. It was so bad. Like, so I just do it in my car after work. I just sit there and like record something. I was doing like 15-minute episodes. And at that point, I was really big into blogging. That was like my side hustle for many years. I was in corporate. And so I was just sharing blogging tips. And it was something that I enjoyed doing. But the quality of what I was doing was, I mean, awful. Like, it was terrible. I was inconsistent. I followed none of the rules. Anyway, that ended up stopping after I think 12 episodes is what I did. And God only knows what the time range was of me doing those. But fast
hold
forward
on real quick before you continue. Are these shows still out there? Can we listen to these episodes?
No, you can't. I actually made sure that those went away. Here's actually one of the beauties of podcasting is you can actually make podcast episodes disappear, I think. I've not been able to go back and ever find it again after I removed everything. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's gone. But good question, Justin. I appreciate that. Anyway, so fast forward many years when I really decided I'm going to give podcasting a shot for real this time. I spent too much time. So on the opposite side, because I know that you train people on how to like have a really good launch and how to do the right things that you need to do. I figured out all those right things, but it took me about 9 months from idea to actually launching, which is just, in my mind, way too long. Like, that's 9 months that I could have been impacting and helping somebody. Now, I don't ever agree with the other side that I did previously, which was to rush a launch, but really I should have been able to figure it out faster than that and just get moving with it. But yeah, so like I took my time to do it, and I think that I really launched properly.
Yeah, dude. I love that you shared that. And, my launch time from concept to launch was about 5 or 6 months. Because I didn't really know what I was doing. Right. And so I've been podcasting about 5.5 years now.
Yeah.
And very similar, right? Like when I started podcasting, I mean, 7 years ago is even further back. Like that's what, like, when the Titans currently, I think Rogan's been doing it for 10 years. Lewis is about 7.5 years or so. So you were really, really early stages. But when I started 5 years ago, I would say to people, hey, I have a podcast. And they go, what's a podcast?
Yeah. Right.
And now it's a completely different world. And it is fast paced, but I think doing it the right way. I mean, obviously, 9 months is a little long because we have all the content out there, but you have to make sure you do it the right way. I mean, I bought a course, and the course was just how do I record and get it on the internet. Right.
Yeah.
And so now there's just so much more to that. And, obviously you being in the podcast space, you've really doubled down, right? You've started now two businesses in the industry. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, where did the true love of podcasting come from for you? What is the thing that you love the most, and why start these companies?
Yeah, so it goes back to my corporate life. Once again, I always kind of tie things back to that, but I did 15 years in the aerospace industry. The aerospace industry is cutthroat, super competitive. I mean, you compete with every company out there and the salesperson sitting next to you, but you're friends with them. So you be nice, but you're still competing with that person. And I just developed this really aggressively competitive personality for a while, which wasn't ever who I was as a kid. I mean, it did help me become who I am today. So I'm thankful for it. But like naturally, I don't feel that I'm really a competitive individual. And thankfully, when I got into podcasting, I was able to kind of step back out of that. And here's why I say that. When I got into the industry and I needed help, I did the same thing you did. I found a course, but I just couldn't figure it out still. I needed to like talk to people. And I just assumed people would be like, oh, another guy starting a podcast. I can't tell you any of this stuff. This is my trade secrets. Like that was my real assumption based off my history in business. That's how it was going to be. I did not find a single person like that. Everyone I talked to was like, here, I'll help you. Here, I have an old mic. Why don't you use this? Or here, let me take you to lunch. Like, let me take you to lunch, Alex, and help you figure this out. We'll kind of make it happen together. I mean, everyone I met was so nice. And then to take it a step further, they're all like, oh, I'll share about your podcast when it goes live. I'll tell my whole audience about it. And I was like, what? Like, what is this? So like, I realized that I stepped out of hyper competitiveness into a really an inner, like, a group of people that just really like to help each other. Interdependent is the word I want to use for that. So it's like a huge, like, just ecosystem of people that are trying to help one another out. And I love that. So I just fell in love with the people who made up podcasting. So as soon as I launched my show, it did very well. And I started speaking at the conferences like you you mentioned that we're both in the PodFest, I guess, leadership, if you will, right? Yeah. And so I started speaking around at conferences. And then I just made it my mission to help other podcasters. Because now that it's years later, I'm a little bit ahead of most people in podcasting at this point. And I decided, I'm just going to devote my time to helping people. And for me, I'm a guy who looks for problems, and then I want to offer a solution to that problem. So the two services that I offer were just a response to what I continuously heard podcast hosts and guests saying that they were really struggling with. And I just went out and tried to find a way to solve that problem for them.
Yeah. And one of them, and obviously as we're having this conversation, you're beta testing and launching the second one. But the first one is PodMatch. And what it is essentially matching podcasters with guests. And vice versa. Guests, people are looking to get on shows, and this is a service that I've used not to get guests, but to get onto other shows, and it's just super effective to be able to easily connect with shows where you know that you can make an impact with their audience. I think it's an absolute no-brainer. And look, there are two sides to podcasting, and I want to talk a little bit about the guesting side here for a second. Then we can kind of flip-flop back and forth, but I think there's great power in the guesting side of podcasting, right? Like people ask me all the time, how do I grow my audience? And I always say, get on other shows. Like, even though there's millions of people that listen to podcasts, it's still a small percentage of the world that listens on a regular basis. And I go, if you want to get to those people, just get on other shows. And so the power of guesting is absolutely mind blowing, not only for podcasters, but just getting your voice out there. Talk a little bit about this to me, because you saw a problem when you started PodMatch that I didn't see. Even for podcasters who need guests, because I get pitched. I mean, I've probably deleted 30 emails today that were pitches already. So, when we look at that, like when did you start seeing that issue? And then what is the tactic of addressing it to make sure you're pairing these people properly?
Yeah, it's a good question. First off, just to kind of touch on something that you just mentioned about podcast guesting being good for podcast hosts as well, not just for business owners and service owners, things like that, or coaches, authors, whatever it might be. Those are all great. Those are obvious. But being a podcast host and being on podcasts, if there's one thing we know about podcast listeners, it's that they listen to podcasts, right? That's what they do. And on average, it's actually some stats out of Buzzsprout. It's between, I don't remember the number. It was either 6 or 7 people listen to an average of every person listens to an average of 6 or 7 podcasts. So that's like, those are the numbers. So like, why can't you be one of them? If they're hearing you on another show and they like you, they might go listen to your show as well. So yeah, you're absolutely right with telling people that advice. So going back to like the idea of why I decided to do PodMatch is again, my framework and my idea for starting a business is always the same. You find an area of passion, which for me was podcasting. You find a problem that people are having in that space, and then you offer a solution to that problem. So whenever I get off a stage, I just, like speaking at a conference, I just make it a habit of asking as many podcast hosts as I can, what are you struggling with? And I consistently heard I'm having trouble finding guests. And Justin, like you've had like all the best guests in the world on your show. I mean, I even think back to an episode that I've been listening to with Jeff Brown. I don't remember the episode number, but he's talking about like reading just a ton of books and how like sometimes that reading isn't just okay. Like reading's okay if you're just like impacting your thinking. Like I'm getting a lot from that episode, but that's like a celebrity guest, like that's a big name that most people when they start can't get. So like you and I can now easily get guests. We get pitched all the time, but we forget about day one when we were like, can anyone be on my podcast? You ask your best friend 3 times in a row to be on your podcast. You're like, I don't know anyone else, or the one cousin that you have that started a business. But like, I kind of forgot. And so listening to them, and people continuously said, I'm just having trouble finding it. Like, I don't want to continuously look for guests. And that's why I decided that was the problem. And the solution was in my mind. I'm like, well, what if we built something that's like an online dating app where we can just connect the guests and hosts together? And so that's essentially what we set out to do. And we've been doing a really good job continuously improving that process and making it really work well for both sides, the guest and the host.
Yeah. And it's been great for me too. Obviously whenever you need to promote something or you've got something out there that you're looking to get in front of the right audience. I mean, to get onto PodMatch, you can literally search like podcasting or personal development or whatever, and really kind of match with that right person. Here's a mistake. And tell me if you've seen this. Here's a mistake that I see often. People are like, oh, I've been on 500 podcasts. And then you realize that like 5 of the 500 are actually in their niche, right? Let's talk a little bit about the power of niching in podcasting and what you see from a guesting standpoint, as far as like making sure you get in with the right show. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, Justin, you're hitting on something that's just so important, because I think a lot of us, we have this I just call it like a social media mindset where numbers are king, right? Like the more likes, the more followers, like that matters to everybody. But the truth is, let's just take social media as an example. If I had 100 followers that could all potentially be a customer, like they are straight up the right person, or 10,000 followers where really none of them really fit my ideal customer, which is more powerful? Every single time, the smaller number is, because that's actually my ideal audience. Like those are my people. And with podcasting, it's the same thing. Not all podcasts are created equal for everybody, right? Like there's some shows, like if you're a comedian, jump on the comedy podcast, go for it. I'm not going to get on those podcasts because there's no benefit to me and I add no value to the audience. And honestly, I'm not that funny. So it's like, why would I do that? And it's really important that you really narrow in on what the host is served, like what their audience is serving. Like who is it that they're talking to? Is there anyone there that you could potentially add value to? Now, I believe you can add value to somebody that could also become a customer. So you want to think that way, like, how can I add value to this audience? And you do the same thing, I'm sure, Justin, but I say no to the mass majority of people asking me to be on their podcast, which some people are like, are you crazy? Yes, be on every single show. And I say no. If I can't help the audience and it doesn't help me at all, I'm not helping the host by being there. So I'm going to pass on that. And that's actually what I say when I'm passing. I just say, hey, listen, I don't think I can really add value to your audience. And for that reason, I'm not going to appear on your show. And almost every time, not every time, but almost every time, they're actually thankful for me saying no, because they're like, oh yeah, I need to remember my audience. Like, I was just trying to find a guest real quick.
Yeah. And I've certainly said no in the past. The people who reach out to me tend to be listeners of my show. So they know that I would fit into their niche, but I have said no. I mean, there've been a couple like millionaire shows. I'm like, well, I'm not a millionaire yet. So I don't know, like, if I'm really going to add any value. I mean, if that's who you're trying to serve, like, I'm not the person. Right. And I think some tech company reached out and they're like, hey, I would love to have you on the show. And I'm like, I'm not in the tech industry. Podcasting, but that's not tech to me. I mean, it's very, very simple these days, how to buy a microphone, plug it in and hit record. A little bit different 7 years ago.
You made that really simple. It took me 9 months to figure that out. All right. So let's don't downplay it too much. I know it's easier now.
There are definitely things that have gotten easier and easier.
Yes.
And obviously there's apps and stuff that make it easier. The thing is, like, you said it took you 9 months to do it the right way. I didn't find out how to do it till 9 months into already podcasting. Right. So I was already in and doing it wrong, miserably wrong for a long time. And so that's huge to say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm serving my audience as a guest or as a host, right? People are so worried about, let's get in front of so many people, X amount of people. And that's not always the thing, depending on where you are in your business. What type of people are you seeing on PodMatch right now? For any podcaster that's listening, should they sign up for it? Anybody who is a potential guest, should they sign up for it? What are you seeing across the board?
Yeah. So at this point, we've got, at time of recording, we have around 19,000 people using the platform now. So it's gotten pretty wide. Like, I'm all about having like a narrow niche. And when it got started, I was thinking entrepreneurship, business specifically. But at this point, really everybody in podcasting seems to, like, I shouldn't say everybody, but like all topics and categories that Apple lists have joined at this point. So some might be smaller than others. Like, we had somebody recently join who they were very specific. They were like a bird watching specific podcast. And so, which is very interesting and actually far more popular than I ever thought it would be. But they were looking for people that specialize in bird watching. I'm like, wow. I was like, I don't know if you'll find anybody, but go ahead and try. But so here's the thing. If you're anybody that's maybe a little bit less narrow than that, you'll probably be able to do all right. So I always recommend, everybody give it a shot. And the thing is, you're not required to say yes to anybody. Like, we have a match and a pass button. At any time, you can just say, I'm just not interested. And you can message back and forth. So it's not like you sign up and it's like, oh, now you have to have these 10 people on your podcast, or you have to be on these 10 shows. It's not like that. It's still a decision. It just gives you access to people that are wanting to be a guest and that are wanting to be a host. Now, with that said, the people that are finding that are on there, it is business heavy for sure. But we've also seen a lot of public speakers join that cover a lot of topics. Yeah. And the reason for that is when we launched into early beta that was live for everybody on June 15th, 2020. And within 2 months, I mean, we had keynote speakers from all over the world joining because they didn't have a platform anymore. So they're like, I'm going to get on podcasts. Somebody put the word out there and these people just started flocking to us. So it was really funny, man. Like, for me, the first year of my show, I had good guests. They were decent. But I'm watching these other shows that have like 7 and 8 episodes and they've got like keynotes, like really great people on their show. I'm like, man, you're starting really well. So yeah, that's kind of the type of people that are on there. And again, it was kind of a very broad range of type of people now.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because I think, people downplay who they can get on their show early. Now, again, the game has changed, but episode 14, I had a Super Bowl champion on my show. And so like you can do it if you do it the right way. Now, the nice part about PodMatch and how you're approaching it is you can truly be niche. Like you said, you can say no. You don't have to even have a conversation with these people. But niching is so powerful in podcasting. And a stat that I love sharing with people, because it kind of blows their mind, is that 80% of shows do less than 100 downloads an episode. Right. And people go, oh, why would I do that? Why would you waste your time? Now, obviously, you and I are fortunate enough that our shows do better than that, but that's through time, consistency, effort, all the things. But I always follow that up with, if there was a room full of 100 people every single week for you to talk to, would you show up? And the answer is yes, right? You have that kind of false idea of numbers because of, people buying followers on Instagram. And so when you look at podcasting, it's your ideal target audience, whether it be 50, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever. It's literally your target audience. So when you niche the right way, it's so powerful. I mean, what have you heard any really cool stories through PodMatch where people are like, oh my God, I got a match, and all this success is happening?
Yeah, the point that you just brought up is so important. It's exactly what I say, by the way. It's not the same as followers on social media, even likes. I mean, someone can scroll past your picture and double tap on it on just about any app these days, and that counts as a like. But they didn't actually invest any time. They might not have even read the description you have on it. But if you have 80 people listening to your podcast, or 50 or 20, it's the same thing as a butt being in a seat and somebody listening to you for the full 30 minutes or 45 minutes, whatever your show is. That is really powerful. So they're not, you can't compare them. Like, they're not the same thing. They are two different things. And it's important that people get that mindset because I get so disheartened when I hear someone who quits their show. There was a guy who I did a coaching call with, and he had 400 people listening to his show every week. He's like, I think I'm going to quit, man. He's like, I have 80,000 people following me on LinkedIn. He's like, and that's just where I need to devote my time. I'm like, you are completely wrong. I'm like, complete opposite. I'm like, throw away your LinkedIn. Don't really, but keep the podcast. Like, at that traction, that's really good. Like, there's very few people that do that well. Anyway, I digress with that point, but I'm glad that you brought that up. I think it's just a really important point. So with PodMatch and with guesting in general, I've heard some really great stories of people that have been able to not only build partnerships with the person that they're doing an interview with. And the reason I bring that up is because something we know, is in order to build a friendship, you have to do something meaningful together. For most people that maybe haven't done hundreds or thousands of podcast episodes, that is a meaningful experience on both sides of the mic. And those people are usually more interested in trying to work together afterwards. So I have countless numbers of stories of people becoming business partners, starting companies together, starting podcasts together, building, helping each other build their brands. It's really cool to be able to see. But there's one person in particular that I think of. I'm going to keep them nameless just for privacy's sake. But I'll give you their first name. First name's Tyler. And Tyler went on, he had never done much podcasting. He got on 150 shows in a year, which is a ton of shows. The guy went for it. But he found
exhausting.
he found all of them that were in his category, and all the shows, most of them were through Pod. He said about 70% of his bookings were through PodMatch, which was really cool. But he did that to raise awareness of his book. And he's a guy that I had never heard of. Most people had never heard of, but he said that his book far surpassed what he and his publicist thought it would ever do in that 1 year. So he got the word out there. He became a name, and people started being like, "Oh, look, I had Tyler on my podcast." People started sharing that because they're like, "No way, he came on my show too." That's really cool. And those type of stories, I know there's more than just that one, but that's just a really cool thing to see the power of what podcast guesting can do for you.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And you talk about being able to sit down with somebody and talk about something they're passionate about, for me, a lot of times I dive into personal stories, and I've shifted gears a little bit on my show where we talk a little bit more tactical things now, but that's just to serve the audience in a different way. But if you get your guest to open up, or you talk about what they're passionate about for 45 minutes or however long, those are relationships that can last a lifetime. I mean, you talked about my wall. The people behind me. I mean, these are people that I get to call friends and partners, and people that their keynote fee is $30,000, but they've spoken at my event for free. Just absolutely mind-blowing things, and it's all because of podcasting and the relationship that you can build. One thing that I do with a lot of my clients is I share those tactics and things on how to build those relationships. What have you seen from your standpoint as a host or a guest, some of the relationships that you've built, and kind of how you've been able to formulate those friendships?
Yeah, so a great example is somebody you brought up earlier, Chris Krimitsos. He's the founder of PodFest, and he's been on my show. I've read his book and all that. And he's somebody
on the planet.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think I'm calling him a friend, but if you've ever met him or even seen him, everyone's just like, oh, he's my friend for sure. That he just has that effect on people. But he really is my friend, I like to think. And he's been somebody that's had just a vested interest in what I'm doing, and he's helped me every step of the way, really just freely. And I'm really thankful for that. And another person is Scott Miller. He's the host of On Leadership for Franklin Covey Group. And man, talk about a guy who's just become a mentor in my life. We text back and forth with both these guys, and they're just always there to help out. And it's great because these are people I'd never have access to, no way have access to, that are literally checking in on me, making sure I'm doing well. What can I share? What can I promote? They're asking me those type of questions. And man, I would not have that relationship if I didn't have these people on my show.
Yeah. And it's so true. And by the way, Chris is another guy who, I host my own live event, and Chris is a master of events when you look at what he's done with, well, the thing is, he's done hundreds and hundreds of events. He's known for PodFest, but that was his whole shtick before PodFest took off. But, it was one of those things where he's helped me a ton with, I'll text him and be like, hey man, I'm kind of weak in this spot. Can I pick your brain really quick? And we're able to hop on a call, and he'll freely help. And without podcasting, it wouldn't have happened. Right. And you talked about community. Podcasting too is a community. Whether you're a guest or you're a host, you get brought into a community of people that are willing to support and help you. Right. Have you seen that from a guesting standpoint, like those people being brought into the community as well, even if they don't don their own microphone and their own show?
Yeah, actually I have. So we have a community with everything that I do, and that's a really important element of it. And we see it's almost 50-50 guests and hosts that are there. And it really, the people that join, I find that they're the ones that are most desperate, I'm going to use that word, to add value to somebody's life. Not necessarily to earn business or anything like that. They're the most desperate to help and serve somebody else. And that's why they ultimately got into either being a host or being a guest. And that, to me, those are people that I'm most like-minded with. Like something I write this down every day. I say, Alex Sanfilippo seeks to be a person of value, not a person of profit. And I do my best to surround myself with people that are like that. And I'm finding these are people out there that have that independent voice that they want to get out to the world to serve it, make it a better place. The community side of it, like if you're serious and you want to do this thing long term, you've got to be in a community. And Justin, I know that you have like a really solid community as well. So you've probably, I'm guessing you've seen something similar, right?
Yeah, you know what? I think community is the thing that changes the game for everybody. A lot of times, we look at the old way of networking. Go show up somewhere, hand out your business card, spit your 30-second commercial, and hopefully you get a client. Nobody does that anymore. Like the way to build a business, the way to grow whatever it is you're trying to do, the way to get your message out there is to become a part of a community. As somebody who has a podcast and hosts my own event, I very, very often get people to reach out and say, hey, can I speak at your event? Hey, can I be on your podcast? And I say the same thing to pretty much everybody. I go, hey, I'm so glad you're interested. Docket's full right now. But if you really want to become a part of what I'm doing, the best way is to show up and become a part of the community. And that's how I'm serving going forward, is to say, hey, I'm going to build a community. And if you want to be a part of it at a high level, you have to come be a part of it at any level. Right. And that's what I'm seeing more and more, is just the beauty of people lifting each other up and wanting to be a part of something and serving others instead of themselves and all that stuff. And I think a lot of that, I think I've always been that person, but it's refreshing seeing that in the podcast community, of people willing and able to do that. Right. And so obviously you've gone on and you've built one awesome business that obviously 19,000 people on the platform, which is absolutely insane, because you just said you launched a little over a year ago, which is absolutely crazy. And now you're launching, company 2 as far as helping podcasters with their flow and all that stuff. But I wanted to ask you, man, I know that there's a right way and a wrong way to be a guest on a show. Do you do any of that type of knowledge building for people that are signing up for PodMatch, of like how to effectively be a guest? Because I think a lot of people miss the mark.
Yeah, it's something that we're actually working on building in there, because when I started, I didn't know that was such a problem. But it all starts with like sending some sort of pitch, right? Or having a one sheet, even like doing a good job on like building out your one sheet, which we put straight into PodMatch, and some people just make their own in a PDF or Word doc. It's basically like your resume type of thing. Yeah. But there's a right way to do it. If it's got 30,000 words on it, no host is interested. Like, we do podcasting because we don't like to read, right?
That's so true. That's so true.
So I tell people, like, hey, do a good job on your one sheet. Get some good pictures taken. Like, for the love of God, don't send people a selfie to like use as their cover art. People like take pride in what they do, like, and you should as well. But then like the next thing is just the pitch. And I find so many hosts, they take it as a time to self-serve and to like basically show their accolades and be like, here's everything I've done. And they just kind of dump it all on you. Dude, I'm not interested in that. Like, what I'm interested in knowing is, are you here to add value to my audience? And if so, what value are you going to add? And to some people who maybe don't understand the difference, I'd be like, well, what's the difference? If I'm sharing everything I can do, that should be the same thing. It's definitely not. There's a right and wrong way to reach out. But so from that, I find that most people get that wrong. And then also on the show, if you're self-promoting, like, here's the thing, like before we started, Justin, I'm not trying to like make myself sound like less prideful. I don't know. It sounds weird to say this, but I told you, like, we don't need to mention PodMatch. We don't need to mention anything I do. Let's just add value. And I thoroughly mean that. Like at the end, I wouldn't be like, wait a minute. We got to talk about PodMatch, everybody. And I've had guests do that. We're like, hold on, I got to promote the book, and you can get 30% off if you go here. Like, don't do that. Like, that's not going to help you. It's not going to help the audience. If someone liked what you said, they're going to come find you themselves. I mean, give them some direction, but just one call to action. It's very simple, very short. And I've always find that to be what converts everything I just shared is what converts the best, from getting on shows to sharing in a good way to actually getting listeners to do something based on what you just shared. Now, I know that was a lot, Justin. I'll let you jump in, but I just shared a lot there.
No, that's huge. I mean, I think that's game changing for so many people. And if they get a second, I encourage them to rewind the last 2 minutes and listen to that again. And I think you can learn so much about doing podcasting the right way to do life the right way. Right. Like, I've found so much of look, if you just give more than you take, if you don't ask and you just keep giving, the world will give back. Right. And a little tip to podcast hosts, what I say to people before I interview them is I say, look, we're definitely going to get to the book and stuff like that. We'll make sure we get there. But is there anything else you definitely want to touch on? And the reason I do the whole, hey, we'll get to the book, or hey, we'll get to the PodMatch, or hey, we'll get to the thing, is because it immediately takes that stress off of them for them to be able to kind of pour in. So I just wanted to kind of share that tip really quick. Because if not, it does become a big pitch fest. I think people are getting better though with time, like with podcasting becoming so frequent for individuals. Like they've just gotten good at it, which has made my job as a host a lot easier. That's for sure.
Right. Oh yeah.
But dude, the neat thing is, man, you've gone on, you've created this successful business. You had a 15-year career, which you were very successful in a very competitive industry. And on this show, I like to say I get to interview some of the most successful people in the world, however you define success. And so my question for you is a two-part question. First part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Yeah. So the way that I would define success is the achievement or advancement toward what your vision or your why is as an individual. So it has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with social status. What it has to do is saying, me, Alex Sanfilippo, this is what I want to become. This is the person I want to be. This is how I want to leave an impact in the world. Am I day by day getting closer to that? Not have I reached that goal, but am I getting closer to that every single day? To me, success is a lifelong journey. I call it taking the stairs instead of the elevator. It's going to take time, but if I'm getting 1% closer to that and leaving a bigger lasting impact on people's lives along the way, I'm becoming a successful person. So that's the way I really view success.
I love it. And what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Yeah. So I'm actually holding my daily journal here. So I write certain things down every day that I feel like I need to remember. So the first thing is I always start my day off. For me, I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. I start off in the Bible. Start off with time in prayer, time in worship. That's what I do, and that's how I really find my center once again. So I have to start my day off with that. That's the first thing that I do, and then after that, it's really important for me to make sure, like I said earlier, to seek to be a person of value, not a person of profit. So I'm always thinking, how am I actually helping people? What am I doing to impact the world, not just myself? And I always try to remind myself, hey, I'm doing for one person today what I wish I could do for everybody. So it's not even about the masses, it's about the one person I see. And the last thing I do is I just remind myself to be where your feet are. So I always say, Alex, be where your feet are. And what that simply means is wherever my feet are planted at that moment, let me be there. So example, right now I'm with you and your audience. I'm not thinking later, I got another podcast interview later today, or I'm hanging out with a friend tonight. I'm not doing that. And when I'm with my friend later tonight or hang out with my wife, I'm not thinking about all the work I have the next day. My goal is to be wherever my feet are in that moment. I found that when I can do that, I can be present in my life at that moment. It goes a lot slower, first off, which I'm thankful for, but also I enjoy it a lot more. I don't let moments pass me by because I'm happy to be exactly where I am in that moment.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. And they're all really, really good things. And I love one thing that you said about how I can do for one person what I wish to do for the masses. I think a lot of people miss that boat, right? People try, a lot of what we talked about kind of hits on that. You talking about, the fake social media numbers or, hey, people are so worried about how many downloads they're getting. It's that one person, right? That one individual. I share a story pretty often early on when I was doing 30 downloads an episode. And I was that person that was like, what am I doing? Nobody cares about this. Am I crazy? Blah, blah, blah. I was putting in all this time and effort. And somebody reached out to me from Japan and said, because of your show, I decided not to take my life. And wow. I realized that no matter what, I will show up, even if it is that one person, because I changed that person's life and therefore it changed the world. And people miss that a lot of the times. People miss the idea of if you can shift one person, so start being the person you're supposed to be for the masses today, even if it is just one person. My long rant is now over. But with that being said, I mean, that's such a game-changing thing. And I'm glad you shared that. Now, obviously on my show, The Growth Now Movement, I wrap up every single episode with the same question. But before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? How do they sign up for PodMatch, by the way, which I highly, what's the word I'm looking for? I highly support PodMatch. I've gone on, I'd like to say that I've messed around on there. I haven't spent a ton of time. Probably if I had to accumulate all the time that I've spent, probably 15 minutes, and I've booked 5 or 6 shows, and it's been a great thing. But how do people sign up for that? What's all the good information?
Yeah, just sounds like you dabble in PodMatch just a little bit, a little sprinkle here and there.
Here and there, hop on, hop off.
Really, everything that I do, you can find there at podmatch.com. It's free to sign up, and we no credit card required. There's no catch with that or anything like that. There is an upgrade plan if you want it, but it's not required. But you can find everything I'm doing there. You'll find a link to the community, to our social links. Everything I'm doing is right there. But honestly, man, what you're doing with this show, dude, because I've listened to it for a while now. I always recommend people hang with the host, but Growth Now Movement, man, you're taking people places, and I personally appreciate it as a listener myself.
Dude, thank you, man. That really means a lot. I appreciate you saying those things. Now, like I said, I wrap every single interview with the same question, which is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
So I tried my best not to to think about this because I knew the question was coming, but I tried to not let myself go there because everything in me wanted to write down an answer for you. But I think that the moment of growth was actually when I decided to leave that aerospace company. I left during 2020, which was a tough year for the world in general, right? I think all of us can admit it was a tough year. And when I decided to leave, I was actually having my best year I'd ever had in that company. I was a senior director. It was a multi-billion-dollar organization. I reported directly to the CEO, and I was so nervous when I walked into his office to tell him that I was leaving because I was looking at my performance. I had 5 departments that I was responsible for, and all of them were the top 5 performing departments in the whole company. Wow. And I walked in and told him I was leaving, and I had never been that nervous in my life. I was like, what am I doing? I'm taking a big risk here. But when I look back at that moment, his response, he's like, you know what? I know the type of guy you are. He goes, whatever you do, you're going to do well. He's like, and I support 100%. He goes, I know you're not even motivated by money, which has always been true for me. But I never voiced that. I never said that. But he's like, I know you're not motivated by money. There's nothing I can do to keep you here. He's like, go out and do it, and I know you're going to do well. And then also the support of my wife with that, was all huge. But the thing is, I put off leaving for months. And what it came down to, I was missing, was something that Brendan Burchard talks about, high performance habits. And it's one of the traits, it's the last trait of a high performer. And it was courage. I was lacking courage because after 15, or at that point, 14 and a half years, you build something pretty good, right? I had a good income, I had great benefits, I had all these perks to go with it. Saying no to all those things, sacrificing the good for the sake of potential great, is a scary thing. But I just had to take courage. And I'd say that was a big defining moment in my life, and one now that I look back at as being one of the best choices I ever made. So I guess just to kind of wrap that up for everybody, if you're thinking that there's something else out there for you, your life is good right now, but it could be great, calculate that. Take a calculated risk and then just have courage and go for it. Because I think that you can look back years later and say, that was the moment that I redefined my life.
Alex, man, what an incredible story. And I love how you framed it, because courage is needed to do big things and to make big change and to make an impact in the world, man. And so I want to honor you and thank you for being that person who took that risk. And now, honestly, just by sharing that little tidbit, now you're inspiring others to do the same thing. So this world, hopefully, will become a better place, man. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. Thank you for building out what you're building, man. I'm excited to see what you do next. I'm excited to stay connected and see what you do next. It's going to be pretty incredible. Thank you.
For sure, man. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.